Well, another big weekend awaits in the EFL Championship as we return to look ahead to match week 33 with games being played across Friday, Saturday and Monday. All 24 teams are in action and we are going to preview and predict all 12 games, give our score predictions and of course encourage you to do exactly the same in the comment section below. If you beat or match my overall score, you will get a shout out in the next recap, which we'll save for next Thursday when we do the next full edition. But there will be a little mini prediction show on Sunday when we look ahead to two rearranged midweek fixtures. Before that, though, we've got to go and have a little look back at what happened in the full midweek edition, match week 32. We got back to a full fixture list, and you know what? I've kept up my pretty solid and consistent run of form. Only one perfect score, which did cost me the match week win this time. That was for Bristol City against Stoke City. The 6 other correct outcomes put me on 9 points overall. And that leaves me in joint third in the table with just 2 people making it into double figures, given some of the surprising results. The Championship's favourite scoreline has disappeared. The new Championship's favourite scoreline only turned up once as well. But a couple of you still managed to do pretty well this week. Akshay level with me on 9 points. Well done to you. Then the 2 in double figures. Second place Marco on 10. And top of the tree, regular player Nigel, who managed to pick up 12 points from a pretty difficult midweek. So well done to all 3 of you. With that out the way, though, we move on to match week 33. And we start with, well, the team that have made me a very busy man today. Because earlier today, we had a manager special for Derby County, who travelled to Queen's Park Rangers with John Eustace at the helm. They've tempted him down the table from playoff chasing Blackburn to relegation contenders Derby. We're going to leave and park most of the John Eustace stuff because obviously we've talked about him a lot today. You can go and see that if you want to up there. But we're going to talk about what is a very important game for Derby, who ended the run of defeats with a late draw at Norwich and another, well, pretty dour draw at home to Oxford United, but still need to find that goal threat, still need to find a way to win games. And away from home, that's not often been the easiest task for them this season. So against a QPR side who are conceding goals, who are becoming a little bit of a mixed bag up there, although I say that, they lost away to a Millwall team that had started to do well under Alex Neil. They lost away to Coventry narrowly, who are right up there in playoff contention. And other than that, they beat Blackburn, they beat Hull. It's not been a disaster, has it? And the Sheffield Wednesday game, another team up in that mix. We said that they just needed a stable, solid season. I know a few fans were getting carried away and talking about the playoffs, but ultimately, QPR have not got to look over their shoulders this year, and that is the next stage of their building process. So absolutely fair play to them. Marty Cifuentes doing a good job. Will John Eustace do the same? Will he get an instant impact? I don't think he will. His teams have generally struggled away from home in the Championship, be it Birmingham or Blackburn in recent times. So I'm going to go for them to set up cautiously and defensively and try and get a point at least out of the game. And I think, unfortunately, this time it won't quite work out. QPR are not the most fluent scorers, so I'm not going to go for many. I'm going to go for a classic Friday night on Sky Sports. I'm going to go for 1-0 to QPR. Let's move on to Saturday then, and the first of the 3 early kickoffs. A big game now at both ends of the table, and a big game generally. It is Cardiff City versus Bristol City. Always a little bit of rivalry in this one. And we have got a battle between a side fighting relegation and now a Bristol City side that is in the playoff mix. They bounced back from that pretty awful defeat at home to Swansea, and a surprise one at that, with a 2-0 win at home to Stoke City, which we obviously predicted. Mehmeti producing the moments of magic, and to be fair, Bristol City, I know I mentioned it before the Swansea game, they are a little bit more consistent this year. They gave Stoke a little bit more of the ball, but they created the best chances, didn't really give up anything on their own goal, and they are generally defensively better than they have been, well, at any stage since we started doing these predictions. The same can't be said, though, for Cardiff City, who shipped 7 at Leeds, 3 in the Cup at Stoke, and then 2 at Portsmouth in midweek as well. Felt like a really important defeat, that one. The fact they were 2 down in 20 minutes as well. I know they tried to fight back into the game, but you can't give teams a 2-goal head start in a Championship. And despite having more of the ball, Pompey were probably deserved winners in the end. It leaves Cardiff just 2 points above the relegation zone and 4 points from the bottom of the table. Not that my side will be doing much to catch them anytime soon. So this game becomes very important for them. And it is one of those where they're so often tight games. And Bristol City, away from home recently, draws galore, really, against Oxford and against Sheffield Wednesday. That narrow defeat at Coventry. You know what? I'm going to sit on the fence and I think I'm going to gamble this weekend. There've not been many Championship's favourite scorelines in recent weeks. This is the weekend they return. I'm going for one apiece in the first of the early kickoffs. The second is another big game in that bottom third of the table. It is Oxford United versus Portsmouth. Oxford were far from their best at Derby County in midweek. Obviously, difficult circumstances at Derby. Obviously, a manager had been changed. They just ended their run of defeats and they were feeling in pretty high spirits. But Oxford, despite having pretty dismal time on the road this year, are starting to pick up points. And it's not pretty. They're setting up very differently to at home where they're targeting games. But they only lost by one at Burnley and then 0-0 draws at Stoke and Derby. That could be the difference. That could be the thing that keeps them away from that relegation mix. They're 9 points clear of it at the moment. And if they can keep picking up those odd points on the road, I think they're going to be in pretty good nick given their home form this year. Gary Rowett doing an excellent job, still only lost one league game, Whereas for Portsmouth, a brilliant and crucial home win against Cardiff City, a flying start out the traps. But away from home, we know what Pompey do. They either lose late on or they get absolutely battered and rest people for a midweek game. Now, they haven't got that situation this time. So I'm thinking they're going to go pretty strong. And as a result, I'm going to go for a pretty close game. They're normally a bit more entertaining, the Oxford home ones. I know they had that frustration against Bristol City, but that was against 10 men. Other than that, they've been pretty strong. So I'm not going to pay attention to the fact they've not been scoring away from home. I'm going to go for a thriller. Both sides will see this as a game they can target. Pompey will probably try and go for a rare away win here. I think it'll backfire. I'm going to go for Oxford to win by 3-2. And a final early kickoff, one that's sure to not have quite so many goals, is Preston North End versus Burnley. Burnley completed a rare feat in a championship this midweek against Hull. They scored more than once, and yet again they kept a clean sheet. 9 conceded in 32. There's only so much you can say. It's remarkable. They got the job done. They dominated the game. They controlled it. And at 2-0, they didn't really have to push too much, but probably should have had one or two more. Zian Fleming's a player I'm a massive fan of, producing those odd moments of glory. And they've got some other good signings who can contribute, as we saw with Edwards in the cup game. So Burnley looking in really good nick, right in that battle, which of the top four all look very strong. And for Preston, a very good midweek result as well. They went away to Norwich and got a 1-0 win. Again, early goals the difference there. They're only shot on target in the 5th minute, but it's the only one they needed. I will say, though, you look at the match stats for this one and you think, 1 shot on target, 8 shots overall, didn't have much of the ball. Was it a smash and grab? It really wasn't. If you go and look at the highlights for the game, Preston had 3, maybe 4 golden opportunities. And on another day, they could have hit on the counter, made those chances count, and probably won very comfortably. So it was almost a perfect away performance. And if they'd had that clinical edge, it could have been a far more comfortable victory. I was really impressed with the way they set up there. And generally under Paul Heckingbottom, they have produced a lot of good performances. So you can see where they're going. They're up to 40 points. They're still only 7 off the playoffs themselves. It's all looking pretty good for Preston too. The question here becomes whether they can score a goal, because we know Burnley are not going to concede based on, well, over 20 matches this season. Preston haven't conceded many recently, albeit most of their games have been away from home, so we've not seen too much of them at Deepdale. I'm going to sit on the fence with a 0-0. Both sides, I think, would probably be quite happy with it. Burnley may be forced to try and look for a winner depending on scores elsewhere, but I'm going to go for a 0-0 draw. It just seems the safest option here. As we move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs and managerless Blackburn Rovers at the time of recording on Thursday. John Eustace has left to go to Derby, but they've still got to focus on facing a resurgent Plymouth Argyle at home. Having said that, Blackburn were pretty good without their manager in midweek, weren't they? A 2-0 win away at West Brom. To be fair to them, they were pretty decent against Wolves, and an early, very dodgy offside decision could have made it a very different game. But Blackburn signed some really good players last summer. They recruited well, and they've got a side that are able to compete. They look a real threat on the counter-attack. It was a disciplined performance. It was a really good victory. It was a really good defensive display without the ball. And we know West Brom aren't the most fluent in front of goal at times, particularly with certain players out. But Blackburn produced a really good display. So fair play to them. Up to 5th place, looking really good at the moment. And for Plymouth, 3 straight wins. I said, would they rest people for midweek if they lost heavily against Liverpool? Well, they didn't need to, did they? They look a new side with Nikola Katic at the back. A 1-0 win in the FA Cup and then a 5-1 win at home to Millwall. Where on earth did that come from? Had scored 4 in 5 games, now 5 in 1. Everything the hit went in. It was a really weird game. On paper, it's a pretty even one. Millwall had a few chances. Plymouth didn't have many great opportunities, but they just made everything count. They gave up the ball, they played on the counter, and they were absolutely fantastic. Katic getting a goal as well. Obviously, Ryan Hardy looking a threat again now. He seems to have got his confidence back, mainly from playing more minutes and getting starts. So Plymouth are now a contender, off the bottom of the table at the expense of my club. But away from home, we've still not seen the best of them. A 2-2 draw at Sunderland was a spirited effort, but it was a game in which they were second best and could have been out of sight the other way. For Blackburn, is there going to be a distraction now John Eustace has gone? There's obviously going to be focus behind the scenes on a new manager. I really don't know what to go for. I've been so impressed with Plymouth in their last two performances, and to be fair, they were good in the West Brom game as well. They were competitive. I just think away from home is going to be a lot tougher. There's part of me that thinks 2-1 Blackburn. It's their favourite score, whether they win or lose. I'm going to stick my neck on the line. Let's go for a draw. Desmond 2-2. Plymouth Argyle to get another point on the road. On to the second 3 p.m. It is Hull City versus Norwich City. A huge one for Hull, who drop into the relegation zone. A 2-0 defeat at Burnley followed that crushing home defeat against Stoke. It's not been a good time for them. And we said it ever since Liam Rosenior got sacked last summer. Yes, you want to play entertaining football, but at what cost? And now in Ruben Selles, they've got a manager who prefers to be disciplined and is less good than Liam Rosenior. So I'm not quite sure how this has worked out for them. That brilliant performance at Sheffield United seems a long, long time ago. And the Burnley game, if we're being honest, it was over after 20 minutes. Burnley were in cruise control. They dominated the game and it became a training session at times. For Norwich, a pretty dismal display against Preston. They look like conceding from every counter. I mentioned it earlier on. Don't be fooled by the stats of Preston having one shot on target and not much of the ball. That could have been 3 or 4. There were golden opportunities there. And for Norwich, it's becoming a very inconsistent second half of the year, particularly in front of goal, where 5s have been followed up with now just 2 in 3 games. And again, this does make it hard to call because Hull City are going to need points. They're going to have to set up a bit more cautiously and prevent those goals going in. They conceded 2 in both of their last 2 home games, which they can't afford to do. Norwich have been struggling in front of goal. I know they won 1-0 at Watford with 10 men, but they're not the best on the road generally. So I'm going to stick my neck on the line with another Championship's favourite scoreline. They've not been happening in recent weeks, but I'm going 1 apiece yet again. Into the second half and a battle between 2 of last season's relegated Premier League teams. But no, it is not the promotion battle that many expected. It is bottom versus second as Luton Town host Sheffield United. Luton continued their dismal winless away run and winless run in general with a 2-0 defeat away at Sunderland. Another game that in the end turned into a little bit of a procession. Luton had one great opportunity, but other than that created nothing, had very little of the ball. And to be honest, the teams looked 2 or 3 divisions apart. It was a pretty scary performance. I've said enough on Luton Town recently. I'm not going to cover it again, but I am extremely concerned at the moment for where this season is heading. Whereas for Sheffield United, they found a way again. A home to Middlesbrough, a 3-1 victory thanks to 2 late goals. Was slightly discomforted by that goal just before the break for Borough, but regrouped and were able to finish really strongly. Created some great chances during the game. It was a far better performance than some of their recent victories. We mentioned after the Pompey match they were perhaps very fortunate. Well, in this game, they were back to somewhere near their best. Still gave up a couple of opportunities, but much better going forward and much better overall. Sheffield United look right in that mix. They've got goal threats from everywhere. And I know Luton generally have been a little bit better and more solid at home, but I cannot see any positives here. Lots of injuries in defence, not much quality since the change of shape either. And I think Sheffield United will romp to victory here. I'm going to go for a closer scoreline, more out of hope than expectation. I have to go for Sheffield United to win by 2-1 at Kenilworth Road. Apologies for the short preview there, but I didn't want to go on a rant. Let's move on to Middlesbrough versus Watford. Of course, Borough, the side beaten by Sheffield United during the week. Not the best of performances, but defensively, we know they are struggling a little bit this year. That's now, 10 conceded in their last 5, which included a clean sheet against West Brom. But where they've come up against those very top sides in Sunderland and Sheffield United in the last week, unfortunately, they have found to be second best, particularly defensively. In this one, though, they've got a chance to get right back in the playoff mix because Watford, one of the out-of-form teams in the division, have been pretty atrocious away from home all season. The Derby game about a month or so ago, probably a rare exception to that. The pressure's starting to mount on Tom Cleverley as they are dropping away from that promotion push, and to be fair, The 4-0 defeat against Leeds, where they were 3 down at the break, again became a bit of a training session. Now, Leeds will do that to a lot of teams this year, and Watford did keep the ball better in the second half, but defensively, they're all at sea. And both of these teams having their struggles defending in recent weeks. For this game, I think if Borough had been away from home, it might have been a slightly different match, but I just think they'll be too strong here for Watford. They've played against top sides and struggled at home. Against the rest of the league, they've been pretty consistent. I'm going to go for Borough to win big. Watford struggled to keep the goals out, but still Borough no clean sheet. I'm going for 3-1 to the home side. As we move on to two teams that suffered probably two of the worst defeats in midweek, it is Millwall versus West Bromwich Albion. I think everyone was pretty stunned by the fact that Millwall lost by 5-1 away at Plymouth, especially considering Plymouth had a pretty big excursion on the Sunday night. It was a relatively even game. There were chances at both ends. It was a strange one in terms of the scoreline. Maybe doesn't reflect the general play, but defensively there will be some concerns there for Alex Neil, particularly after they kept 3 clean sheets in 4 in all competitions prior to that. Should it just be a blip in the road after 4 successive wins? Alex Neil will certainly hope so against a West Brom side that are now becoming very inconsistent. Lose, win, lose, win, lose. And at home to Blackburn, probably the most surprising because their home form had generally been very consistent. Very hard to beat West Brom at the Hawthorns, but a 2-0 defeat against Blackburn was pretty poor. A managerless side, Tony Mowbray's former club, they had most of the ball, they had more of the chances, but again got hit on the counter-attack. It's a very difficult time for West Brom because despite the fact they're still being a bit more creative than they perhaps were under Corberan, without Josh Maja through the middle, without Daryl Dike, who always seems to be injured, and with 1 or 2 others out as well, they've not had a real goal-scoring threat, which is going to make it quite difficult for them in the next few weeks or so. And I wonder if that's going to impact this one as well. They're going to have to defend set pieces better. They obviously had Carl Bartley out in midweek after his ridiculous actions at the end of the Sheffield Wednesday game. But in this one, I'm going to go for a sit on the fence, I'm afraid. Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. And I think after midweek, both sides would probably take that. On to the penultimate game on Saturday, which is Sheffield Wednesday versus Coventry. Both sides won 1-0 in the week, but what a result it was for Coventry City. A late one against QPR in the 94th minute keeps them within 3 points of the playoffs, and it was a really crucial goal. It was a game where they promised to be frustrated. It was a game actually where both sides had a lot of key chances. QPR, we know, aren't the best in front of goal. Coventry weren't able to take theirs either. But you've just got to find a way to win, and at the moment, Coventry City and Frank Lampard's side are finding a way to pick up points. Yes, that brief blip in the road with Leeds and then the Ipswich Cup game, but in the Championship, starting to look very strong against anyone other than the top 4 sides. For Sheffield Wednesday, it continues to be a very solid season. Bounced back from the West Brom game with a 1-0 win away at Swansea City. Let's be fair, Swansea are in awful form and offered no threat whatsoever to them. But Sheffield Wednesday, while not completely consistent, for the most part, just look a polished, solid Championship side. They're up in 8th place, they're 2 points off the playoffs, and Danny Roll continues to do a wonderful job. So a massive well done to them. This game, though, it's a battle of 2 pretty good form teams. Both will see this as an opportunity to make the playoffs. Coventry have won 5 of their last 6. Sheffield Wednesday have only lost 2, and they were, with respect to away at West Brom and Leeds, who are both in the top 6. At home, they're a hard side to beat. They do draw the odd game. I'm going to go for them to nick this one. Coventry are flying. A lot of people will go for them to win. I think this might be a little slip in the road. Let's go for Sheffield Wednesday by 2-1 at home. And the final game on Saturday afternoon is Stoke City versus Swansea City. Two sides largely out of form and looking over their shoulder. Stoke got their first win under Mark Robins, had a disappointing defeat in the Cup, and then were pretty soundly beaten at Bristol City. It wasn't the best performance in the world, didn't have a shot on target, and Bristol City probably could have scored more. It was a game where they had possession and did nothing with it. It was just a frustrating day, and Stoke seem to go through this stage every year under a new manager. Then they pick up, start to look good, then they sack the manager after a tiny poor run, and then the process recycles. So hopefully the cycle won't start again and they'll give Mark Robins time. But they're only 3 points off that relegation zone, and much like this time last year, are looking over their shoulder yet again. For Swansea, yes, that win against Bristol City was important, but it was a temporary relief because apart from that, they have been diabolical in recent weeks. A 1-0 defeat at home to Sheffield Wednesday could have been more. They offered nothing. In a home game against a side that aren't in that top 6, to offer nothing at all is a real worry. Same happened at home to Coventry. Away at Norwich, they were dismal. Away at Cardiff in a derby, they were pathetic. This is a worrying time for Swansea. It's not looking good for them at the minute. I can't predict them to get anything here. Mark Robins has had some good performances with Stoke. They've struggled in front of goal at times. I am going to go for them to win this one because Swansea, they just don't look good at all. I'm going to go for Stoke to win by 2-0 and Swansea's woes to continue. And the final game takes place on Monday night, and it is a huge game at the top of the EFL Championship. It is Leeds United v Sunderland, first v fourth, with just 7 points separating two sides that are both unbeaten in their last 6 league games. Leeds are starting to really hammer it down in front of goal. 4-0 against Watford, 2-0 Coventry, 7-0 against Cardiff. It's only Burnley that have managed to stop them scoring in recent weeks. And to be fair, as much as we talk about Leeds going forward, they're starting to put the run of clean sheets together as well. 5 in a row now in the league. I know they had the blip against Millwall in the Cup. It was a training session against Watford. It was so dominant. For Sunderland, a very comfortable day against Luton, against one of the worst away sides in the division. Prior to that, though, the one worry had been that they'd started conceding silly goals. I think the Plymouth and Watford would very much be considered drop points. Brilliant performance away at Borough, but still gave up a couple of goals. They do need to improve that defensive side of the game. They give up chances, and my concern is Leeds United are the team that will take advantage. They've scored 66 goals this year, 16 more than anybody else in the division. And at home, they are blisteringly good. I do feel they might give up a chance to Sunderland on the break because they play very high, and Sunderland have got probably the best counter-attacking team in the league, bar Leeds. So I think they're going to be a threat. I think Leeds United will win. I'm going to go for the run of clean sheets to end, but still 3 points at Ellen Road. 2-1 for Leeds United to finish off. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. Lots of big scorelines. I've gone for a thriller in the early Saturday game between Oxford and Pompey. 3-2 in that one. Borough to score 3 at home to Watford as well. And then at the top end of the table, Burnley to drop points away at Preston North End. Sunderland to lose at Leeds United, with Leeds and Sheffield United extending the gap in the top 2. Those are just my predictions for match week 33 though. Do you agree or disagree? Give me your predictions in the comments below. If you beat or match my overall score, you will get a shout out in the next recap when we return this time next week to look ahead to match week 34. We did have our Derby manager special earlier today. You can see what we think of the John Eustace appointment up in the eye above. We'll also be back on Sunday for a mini prediction show as we look ahead to the 2 rearranged midweek games. And of course, there will be a Blackburn manager special coming soon as well. If you're looking forward to all of that, then subscribe and turn the notification bell on. Make sure you don't miss a thing. And we'll see you back here on Sunday evening to look ahead to another 2 big games in the Championship.